What type of a king was Josiah, and how do we know? This is a question we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of 2 Chronicles on walking through the Bible.
The glory of his cross.
Today we're going to be discussing 2 Chronicles chapter 34, verses 1 to 7. But before we do that, let's read the passage. If you have a Bible with you, turn to 2 Chronicles chapter 34, verse 1. But if you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So 2 Chronicles chapter 34, beginning at verse 1. Josiah was 8 years old when he became king, and he reigned 31 years in Jerusalem. And he did what was right in the sight of the Lord, and walked in the ways of his father David. He did not turn aside to the right hand or to the left. For in the 8th year of his reign, while he was still young, he began to seek the God of his father David. And in the 12th year of his reign, he began to purge Judah and Jerusalem of the high places, the wooden images, the carved images, and the molded images. They broke down the altars of the Baals in his presence, and the incense altars which were above them he cut down. And the wooden images, the carved images, and the molten images he broke in pieces, and made dust of them, and scattered them on the graves of those who had sacrificed to them. He also burned the bones of the priests on their altars, and cleansed Judah and Jerusalem. And so he did in the cities of Manasseh, Ephraim, and Simeon, as far as Naphtali, and all around, with axes. When he had broken down the altars and the wooden images, had beaten the carved images into powder, and cut down all the incense altars throughout all the land of Israel, he returned to Jerusalem. In our last lesson, we concluded our look at the reigns of Manasseh and Amon. This covered a period of 57 years of history. These two kings were the first two that exclusively ruled apart from the kings of Israel to the north. Manasseh's reign was a mixed bag. The beginning of his reign could only be described as abominable. He worshipped idols. He desecrated the temple of God. He practiced the occult as well as child sacrifice. So angry was the Lord that God stirred up the Assyrians to come and take Manasseh captive. While in captivity, Manasseh humbled himself, repented, and sought God's deliverance. God, as the God of mercy, forgave Manasseh, who upon his return removed the idolatry from the land and served God alone. However, the damage had already been done. Manasseh's actions may have bought Judah a reprieve, but God had now seen enough, and would eventually send Judah off into captivity. Following Manasseh's 55-year reign, Amon reigned in Judah, but only for 2 years. His wickedness was worse than the former wickedness of his father, for he brought back the idol worship, he desecrated the temple, and did not humble himself at the Lord's reproof. Fortunately for Judah, his reign was short, for he was assassinated by some of his servants, leaving Josiah to reign in his place. Coming to chapter 34, and we began to see the reign of Josiah. Josiah was 8 years old when he began to reign, and due to the fact that his father was assassinated, he likely had to have regents help him until he was older. The chronicler tells us that Josiah would reign for 31 years in Jerusalem, meaning that at his death, our timeline would come down to 609 BC, only 3 to 4 years before the Babylonian captivity. Josiah was a righteous king in Judah. In fact, he was the last righteous king in Judah, with the 4 that would come after him, 3 of which were his sons, being wicked. But I would like us to notice who his righteousness was compared to. It wasn't other notable kings of Judah, but David, the first king of this house. As we have discussed earlier, only 2 other kings in Judah's history came with his epitaph, Asa and Hezekiah. And the reason that Josiah came with his epitaph is evident from what we will read of in the next few lessons, which is that not only was he righteous himself, but he reformed the religion in Judah so that it conformed to God's will and not man's will, thus bringing the nation along with him. Seeing as how Josiah had a wicked father, and he wasn't alive to witness the righteousness of his great-grandfather Hezekiah, how did Josiah turn out this way? Well, seeing as how he was 8 years old when he began to reign, it is evident that he had righteous advisors, and perhaps even a righteous mother, who helped him grow up to be the man that he was. As we have discussed numerous times before, faith is not genetic, it is personal. We will not go to heaven based on our parents' faith, nor will we go to hell based on our parents' lack of faith. The righteousness of the righteous will be upon him, and the wickedness of the wicked will be upon him. And so Josiah, like David, like Asa, and like Hezekiah, were righteous not only because they wanted to obey God personally, but because they wanted their people to obey God too. The way that Josiah first showed this was through his actions of religious reforms and the removal of the high places and idolatry in Judah. And in describing this, 2 Chronicles helps us fill in some of the gaps left by 2 Kings. The religious reform in Judah didn't happen overnight. It came in stages. When Josiah was about 16 years old, the 8th year of his reign, it is said that Josiah began to seek the God of his father David. When Josiah was 20 years old, the 12th year of his reign, he began to purge Judah and Jerusalem of the high places, as well as the wooden, carved, and molded images. He broke down the altars of Baal, cutting all those images into pieces, making them as dust, and scattering them on the graves of them that worshipped those idols. This would be an act of desecration, meant to show Judah the evil nature of idolatry. Josiah even went so far as to go into what had been the northern nation of Israel and cut down their altars and images so that they would no longer be an influence upon his people. We saw this back in our study of 2 Kings 23. Thus, Josiah was not simply content with worshiping God himself. He was not content with getting the people to worship God alone. He wanted to spread that worship among a people that had settled into the land of Israel in the north so that they wouldn't be a bad influence upon his people. This is how Josiah is like David and is compared to him in the same way that Asa and Hezekiah were. But even with all these things Josiah had done, something was still missing. Josiah didn't know that something was missing, but it was, and it will come to light based on a discovery made in the temple in the 18th year of his reign. We'll find out what that discovery was, the Lord willing, in the next lesson. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of 2 Chronicles chapter 34, verses 8 to 18, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.